Ethan jolted awake, the strange weight against his side pulling him from sleep. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, he stared at the ceiling of his cramped room on the Galactic Collective Space Station. Everything seemed normal until he turned his head. Right next to him, tucked under his blanket, was Zara, his alien roommate. Ethan froze. His brain struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. Zara's iridescent skin shimmered faintly under the low light, her glowing markings pulsing gently, almost like breathing. Her long silver hair sprawled across the pillow, a faintly sweet scent hanging in the air. Ethan's voice caught in his throat. "Zira?" Zira stirred. Her bright violet eyes opened slowly, and for a split second she looked relaxed, until her gaze locked with Ethan's. Her expression changed from peaceful to absolutely horrified. "Human," she squeaked, sitting up so quickly that her forehead nearly bumped his. "What are you doing in my bed?" "Your bed?" Ethan blurted out, sitting up too. "This is my bed. You're the one who climbed in." Zira's markings flashed a bright pink, a Tyrrhenian sign of embarrassment. She glanced around the room, her confusion growing. "Impossible. I went to sleep in my nest pod last night." "Well, congratulations," Ethan said, gesturing to the tiny bed. "You somehow ended up here instead." For a few long seconds, they stared at each other, both unsure of what to say. Zara's markings faded back to their usual soft glow, though her eyes still darted nervously. Finally, she pulled the blanket around herself, as though trying to create a barrier between them. "This is highly inappropriate," she muttered. Tyrrhenian customs strictly forbid sharing sleeping spaces unless. "Unless what?" Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. "Unless there is trust," she finished quickly, her cheeks darkening to a purplish hue. "But that is not important. This is your fault." "My fault?" Ethan repeated, incredulous. "You were the one who sleepwalked into my bed." Zira frowned, clearly flustered. "Tyrrhenians do not sleepwalk." This must be some kind of anomaly. Ethan ran a hand through his messy hair. "Look, let's not make this a big deal. Weird stuff happens on this station all the time. Maybe you were dreaming. Maybe." A sudden chime interrupted him as the door console activated. A robotic voice echoed through the room. "Urgent station notice. Gravitational fluctuations detected overnight. Minor disruptions in environmental systems." Ethan's eyes widened. Gravitational fluctuations. That could explain it. Zira blinked. "Explain what?" Ethan smirked, unable to stop himself. "That you rolled into my bed like some kind of shiny bowling ball." Zira's markings flared pink again. "Humans are insufferable," she snapped, pulling the blanket tighter around her. Ethan laughed despite himself. "Relax, Princess Sparkles. No harm done. Just, next time, aim for your pod, okay?" Zira glared at him, but a flicker of amusement softened her expression. "You are insufferable, but I suppose no harm was done." As Ethan climbed out of bed to start the day, he couldn't help but shake his head. He'd signed up for life on a galactic station to escape boredom, but he never expected his biggest surprise to come from his alien roommate. And something told him this wasn't the last time Zira would surprise him. The station's artificial morning light flickered on, filling the small room. Ethan stretched, rubbing his neck as he glanced back at Zara, who still sat bundled in his blanket like a shimmering cocoon. Her violet eyes narrowed in irritation as she muttered something in her alien language. "You know, this whole rolling into my bed thing could be the station's fault," Ethan said, grabbing his worn-out jacket. "The notice said there were gravitational fluctuations. Maybe it messed with your pod." Zira peeked out from the blanket, her silver hair a tangled mess. Turinian pods are designed to withstand gravitational disturbances. They are crafted using centuries of precise engineering. I do not roll. Well, you did last night, Ethan teased with a grin. Maybe your pod couldn't handle the bowling ball technique after all. Her markings flared bright pink again. I told you, Turinians do not roll. Ethan chuckled, stepping toward the food dispenser mounted on the wall. He punched in a quick request, and a cup of steaming coffee slid out. He turned back to Zira, who was now cautiously sliding out of bed. Fine, she said, brushing herself off. Let's assume this gravitational disturbance is the reason. That does not excuse your primitive bedding system. Ethan raised an eyebrow as he sipped his coffee. Primitive? My bed is perfectly normal. It's tiny and unstable, Zira said, glaring at the rumpled sheets as if they personally insulted her. How can humans sleep like this without breaking their spines? We're tough, that's how, Ethan shot back, smirking. It's called resilience. Zira crossed her arms, her markings softening to a calm blue as she sighed. Turinians value comfort and precision. It is strange to live among humans. Strange? Oh, you have no idea, Ethan muttered, shaking his head. You should see the station's gym. Yesterday, a 6-armed Krivik challenged me to a push-up contest. I lost, badly. Despite herself, Zara's lips twitched as if fighting a smile. Humans are odd creatures, she admitted. Yet, resourceful. Ethan grinned. I'll take that as a compliment. Suddenly, a loud thud shook the walls. Ethan's coffee nearly spilled as he stumbled. Zira steadied herself, her markings flashing yellow in alarm. What was that? She asked. Ethan glanced at the blinking console by the door. I don't know, but I don't like it. The station's intercom crackled to life. Attention crew. Gravitational fluctuations worsening. All residents are advised to secure personal items and remain indoors. Zira frowned, her markings shifting to a worried green. This is not normal, is it? Ethan shook his head. Nope. And when the station says stay indoors, that usually means something's broken. Before Zira could respond, another thud reverberated through the room, followed by a faint hum that grew louder and louder. Ethan's eyes widened as his coffee cup began to slide across the desk on its own. Ah, Zira, he said, his voice uneasy. Zira's glowing eyes snapped to the cup, then back to Ethan. What is happening? The room lurched suddenly, and with a yelp, Zira tumbled forward, straight into Ethan again. The two of them hit the floor in a tangled heap. Ow, Ethan groaned, rubbing his shoulder. Really again? Zira glared at him, her cheeks glowing purple. This is not my fault. Ethan couldn't help but laugh despite the chaos. Sure, blame the gravity. Again. As the station continued to rumble, Ethan realized this was more than just a simple glitch. Something strange was happening, and he had a feeling this was only the beginning. The room trembled again, the lights flickering as if the station itself were struggling to stay upright. Ethan and Zira scrambled to their feet, both looking equally shaken. This isn't normal, Ethan said, steadying himself against the wall. The coffee cup slid across the desk again, but this time it floated slightly before clattering to the floor. His eyes widened. Wait a minute, is gravity failing? Zira grabbed the edge of Ethan's desk to hold herself steady, her markings flashing a sharp yellow, a sign of alarm. The artificial gravity stabilizers must be malfunctioning. This station is too old to handle fluctuations like this. Another lurch sent Ethan stumbling backward. Great. A 200-year-old station on the verge of falling apart. Just what I needed today. Zira shot him an annoyed look. Stop complaining and focus. If the gravity stabilizers completely fail, this entire section will lose control. We'll be floating like dust particles. Ethan groaned. So how do we stop it? Zira hesitated, her glowing markings dimming slightly. We don't. The engineers in the control hub will handle it, assuming they know what they're doing. Ethan didn't like the sound of that. He'd worked with the station's maintenance crew before, and while they were hardworking, they weren't exactly the sharpest tools in the shed. I don't trust those guys with a wrench, let alone a critical system failure, he muttered. Before Zira could respond, the intercom crackled to life again. Emergency alert. Gravity stabilizer failure detected. All personnel report to secure zones immediately. Zira turned sharply to Ethan, her violet eyes wide. Secure zones? That's the central hub 2 decks down. Ethan winced. 2 decks? With the gravity acting like a broken yo-yo, we'll never make it without crashing into a wall. As if to prove his point, the room tilted sideways. Zira let out a startled yelp as she grabbed onto Ethan's arm for balance. The two of them tumbled toward the bed in a heap. Would you stop falling on me? Ethan groaned, his face half buried in the blanket. I am not doing this on purpose. Zira snapped, her markings flaring pink in frustration. The room suddenly steadied for a brief moment, and Ethan took the chance to pull himself upright. We can't stay here. If the stabilizers fail completely, we'll get stuck. Zira nodded, brushing her silver hair back from her face. Fine, but if we're going to the hub, we need to move now, before the gravity shifts again. Ethan grabbed his toolkit from under the desk. I hope you're good at climbing, Princess Sparkles, because we're about to pull off the weirdest workout of our lives. Zira shot him a glare, though there was a flicker of amusement in her eyes. If I fall again, I'm blaming you. Fair deal, Ethan said with a grin. The two of them pushed open the door to the hallway outside. It was chaos. Loose items floated midair, lights flickered, and a loud hum filled the station like an ominous heartbeat. Ethan took a deep breath. Let's go. And whatever happens, don't let go of the railings. Zira nodded, her markings glowing softly. Agreed. We survive together, or we float apart. With that, the two of them started moving, pulling themselves hand over hand along the walls as the hallway shifted unpredictably. For Ethan, it felt like the worst zero-gravity carnival ride he'd ever experienced. But one thing was certain, this day couldn't get any stranger. Or so he thought. Ethan gripped the wall railing tightly as he floated awkwardly down the corridor, his toolkit slung over his shoulder. Beside him, Zira moved with surprising grace, her Tyrrhenian body adapting quickly to the zero-gravity environment. Her silver hair floated around her face like a shimmering halo, and her markings glowed a calm blue as she moved. You look like you've done this before, Ethan grumbled, kicking off the wall to push himself forward. Tyrrhenians are used to lower gravity planets, Zira replied smugly, reaching the next handhold with ease. Unlike humans, we don't flail like hatchlings. Ethan shot her a glare. I'm not flailing. I'm navigating creatively. Zira snorted softly but didn't respond. The hallway around them was a mess. Personal items, loose panels, and even someone's lunch tray floated aimlessly in midair. An empty soda can bounced off Ethan's head, making him wince. Who even drinks soda in space? He muttered, pushing it aside. They finally reached a T-junction in the corridor, where a large maintenance hatch led to the central hub. Ethan floated toward it and hooked his arm around the railing, pulling himself closer. Zira followed, her glowing eyes scanning the flickering control panel next to the hatch. Are you sure this is the right way? She asked, her markings pulsing faintly. Ethan tapped the console with a frown. This leads straight to the gravity stabilizers. If anyone's working on the system, we'll find them here. If not, well, I brought my tools. Zira crossed her arms, unimpressed. You. Fix a stabilizer. Humans barely understand Turanian technology. Ethan grinned, his confidence unshaken. What can I say? We're good at improvising. Before Zira could respond, a deep metallic groan echoed through the corridor. Ethan froze. The sound rumbled like a beast waking up, and suddenly the artificial gravity flickered back to life, at full force. Ethan and Zira dropped like stones. Ah! Ethan yelped as he crashed onto the metal floor, his toolkit clattering loudly beside him. Zara landed a little more gracefully, though she stumbled to her knees, muttering something in Tyrrhenian that didn't sound polite. Ethan groaned, rubbing his elbow. Okay, maybe a little warning next time. Zira stood, brushing herself off. Be grateful we didn't hit a wall instead of the floor. The corridor hummed with an eerie quiet. The gravity felt heavier than usual, as though the stabilizers were struggling to hold control. Ethan pushed himself to his feet, grabbing his toolkit. Let's move. If this thing glitches again, we're going to end up floating, or flattened. Zira nodded, following him as he pried open the maintenance hatch. Inside, the tunnel leading to the central hub was dimly lit, cables and pipes running along the walls like tangled veins. Stay close, Ethan muttered, his voice echoing slightly in the narrow passage. And watch your step. These tunnels are a nightmare, even when the station isn't falling apart. I am not afraid, Zira replied confidently, though her glowing markings flickered nervously. As they crawled through the tunnel, Ethan's mind raced. The gravity stabilizers were critical to the station's survival. If they failed completely, the station would collapse in on itself, taking everyone with it. We're almost there, Ethan said, spotting the light of the central hub up ahead. Let's just hope whoever's supposed to be fixing this didn't take a nap. But as they reached the hub and climbed through the final hatch, Ethan stopped cold. The control room was empty. Flickering monitors displayed red warning lights, and a loud alarm pulsed through the air. Worse still, the gravity stabilizer core, a massive glowing cylinder at the center of the room, was sparking violently. That doesn't look good, Zira said, her voice low. Ethan's stomach dropped. No, it really doesn't. The stabilizer core sputtered, and the gravity shifted again, making Ethan stumble. The warning lights flashed brighter, and a robotic voice blared through the speakers. Gravity core destabilizing. Manual override required. 5 minutes until core collapse. Zira turned to Ethan, her markings glowing in anxious green. What now, human? Ethan swallowed hard, tightening his grip on his toolkit. Now we save the station. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as the robotic voice echoed through the control room. Gravity core destabilizing. Manual override required. 5 minutes until core collapse. 5 minutes? Ethan groaned, staring at the sparking stabilizer core. The glowing cylinder flickered dangerously, a mix of bright blue energy and erratic sparks. Why does it always have to be 5 minutes? Zira stood beside him, her markings now glowing a nervous yellow. Because humans have an odd love for near disasters, she muttered. What do we do? Ethan grabbed his toolkit, pulling it open in a hurry. We fix it. Or at least, I fix it while you keep me from getting fried. Zira raised an eyebrow, her glowing eyes narrowing. I do not understand human engineering. Good news, I don't understand it either. Ethan replied, grinning through his nerves. But I'm really good at guessing. Zira stared at him, her mouth opening to argue, but another violent spark shot from the core, making them both flinch. The gravity in the room flickered again, sending a pen and a floating wrench tumbling through the air before slamming back to the ground. "We don't have time to argue," Ethan said, dashing toward the core's control panel. "Just stay close, keep an eye on the readings, and shout if something looks like it's going to explode." "That sounds like everything in here." Zara called after him, though she followed quickly, her glowing markings pulsing brighter. Ethan dropped to his knees in front of the control panel, yanking open its metal casing. A tangle of sparking wires and overheating circuits greeted him. He groaned. "Oh, come on. Who designs these things?" "A toddler with a box of crayons." Zira stood over him, watching the monitors flash red. 3 minutes, Ethan." I know," he muttered, his fingers moving quickly. He grabbed a pair of tools and began rerouting the damaged wires, sparks flying dangerously close to his face. The core let out a loud whine, its glow pulsing in a strange rhythm. Zyra's eyes darted to the monitors. "The energy levels are rising again." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm either fixing it or making it a lot worse," Ethan replied, his face scrunched in focus. Zira groaned, throwing up her hands. "Humans are insane." Ethan laughed to spite himself. "Yeah, but you love it." 2 minutes remaining, the robotic voice announced, calm and unbothered. Zira gripped the railing near the core. "Hurry, human." Ethan's hands moved faster than ever. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he twisted wires, bypassed circuits, and slammed his fist on the malfunctioning relay. "Come on, you piece of junk. Work." Suddenly, the whining noise stopped. The core's glow steadied, humming quietly like a sleeping beast. The monitors blinked green, and the robotic voice chimed again. "Gravity stabilizer restored. System operating within safe parameters." Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He collapsed back against the floor, grinning up at the ceiling. "I did it. I actually did it." Zira knelt beside him, staring at the monitors in disbelief. "You actually fixed it. You are lucky beyond reason." Ethan smirked, wiping sweat off his forehead. "Nah, just human." Zira's glowing markings shifted to a soft blue, calm, but with a hint of admiration. "You may be reckless, Ethan, but you are impressive." Ethan sat up, laughing softly. "Thanks, Princess Sparkles. Now let's get out of here before gravity decides to play another prank." As they stood, the room felt calm again. For once, the station was quiet. No alarms, no flickering lights, just the steady hum of the stabilizer. But as Ethan slung his toolkit back over his shoulder, he glanced at Sarah with a grin. "You know, for a roommate who rolls into my bed, you're not half bad in a crisis." Zira glared at him, her markings flaring pink in embarrassment. "I did not roll into your bed." Ethan laughed, shaking his head as they headed for the exit. Something told him life with Zira was never going to be boring. The walk back to their quarters was eerily quiet. The station had stopped shaking, and the artificial gravity finally felt stable beneath their feet. For once, Ethan wasn't dodging floating objects or bracing for sudden falls. "Maybe we can relax for 5 minutes," Ethan muttered, adjusting his toolkit strap. Zira, walking beside him, glanced around with suspicion. Her glowing markings flickered faintly yellow. "Relax? You humans are strange. When things are quiet, it usually means something worse is coming." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Come on, Princess Sparkles, can't you enjoy a victory for once? I just saved the station from collapsing like a tin can." Zira frowned, her violet eyes narrowing. "It was reckless. You nearly electrocuted yourself." "Yeah, but I didn't," Ethan said with a grin. "You're welcome, by the way." Before Zira could reply, a loud crackle sounded from the intercoms, followed by an all-too-familiar robotic voice. "Attention, gravity stabilizer restored." Secondary system diagnostics required. Residual gravitational anomalies detected in quarter sector 7b. Ethan froze mid-step. Wait, did that just say our sector? Zira's markings flashed yellow again. Yes, it did. Ethan groaned, dragging a hand down his face. Of course it's us. It couldn't be anyone else, could it? Without waiting, the two of them hurried down the corridor. As they reached their shared room, the door slid open with its usual mechanical hiss, and what they saw made Ethan stop dead in his tracks. Everything inside their room was floating. Pillows, blankets, and random objects hovered midair, spinning gently as if caught in a strange current. Zira's glowing nest pod, once perfectly anchored to the corner, now drifted lazily near the ceiling, swaying like a balloon. Ethan blinked. This is ridiculous. Zira stepped inside cautiously, swatting away a floating mug. Residual anomalies, she muttered. The stabilizer hasn't fully corrected itself here. Ethan followed, grabbing at his floating pillow and pulling it down. Great. First you roll into my bed, and now your bed's trying to roll into orbit. Zira turned sharply, her markings flashing bright pink. How many times must I say, Turanians do not roll? Ethan smirked. The evidence says otherwise. Zira glared at him, though she couldn't stop one of her blankets from drifting onto her head like a scarf. You are insufferable. Ethan burst out laughing. You look good in blankets. Zira pulled it off and crossed her arms. Focus, human. How do we fix this? Ethan shrugged, tossing his pillow back into the air where it floated away again. This isn't a full stabilizer issue. It's more like leftover gravity echoes. It'll settle on its own, eventually. Zira's shoulders slumped. And until then? Ethan flopped onto his bed, where he hovered an inch above the mattress. We enjoy the world's worst zero-gravity hotel. Zira shook her head, muttering in Turanian under her breath as she sat on the floor, only to float slightly upward. She groaned in frustration. I hate humans, she said. Ethan grinned up at the ceiling. Nah, you'll get used to us. Zira shot him a withering look, though the faintest flicker of a smile crossed her lips. For all the chaos, she had to admit, life on the station was never boring with Ethan around. Ethan floated just above his bed, staring at the ceiling with his arms behind his head. Around him, objects still hung midair, drifting lazily like leaves in water. Zira sat cross-legged nearby, her glowing markings flickering faintly in frustration as she poked at her floating tablet. This is absurd, Zira muttered, swiping at the tablet that kept drifting out of her reach. How can you just lie there like nothing is happening? Ethan grinned, tilting his head toward her. Because freaking out won't fix it, Princess Sparkles. Besides, this is kinda fun. It's like being in zero-gravity training. Fun. Zira's markings flared pink with irritation. This is chaos. Turanians value stability and control. Ethan reached out, grabbing a floating sock that had wandered by. Well, humans thrive in chaos. You'll get used to it. Zira glared at him, though her lips twitched as if fighting a smile. You say that a lot. Because it's true, Ethan said, shrugging as he let the sock drift away again. Suddenly, the lights flickered once more, and a faint hum passed through the room. With a soft thud, everything dropped to the floor, including Ethan, who landed flat on his bed with a loud oof. Zira's pod thudded back into its corner, her belongings scattering around her. She blinked in surprise. Did it stop? Ethan sat up, rubbing his back. Looks like the stabilizers finally sorted themselves out. He glanced at the mess. Well, mostly. Zira stood, brushing her silver hair back as her markings calmed to a soft blue. Finally, I can return my nest to its proper order. Ethan chuckled, pulling his blanket back onto his bed. Yeah, you clean your nest. I'll deal with all of this. He gestured to the scattered socks, tools, and floating cereal box that had fallen open on the floor. As Zira moved toward her pod, she paused and looked back at him. Ethan. He glanced up. Yeah. Her violet eyes softened slightly, and her markings glowed faintly. Thank you for earlier. I know we argue, but you are capable when it matters. Ethan grinned. Wow. Did you just admit I'm useful? Should I record this moment for history? Zira's markings flared pink again. Do not ruin it. Ethan laughed, shaking his head. Relax, Princess Sparkles. You're not so bad yourself when you're not falling into my bed. I did not. Zara started, then stopped herself, taking a deep breath. Never mind. Humans are impossible. Ethan smirked as he began cleaning up. And yet, here you are, stuck with one as your roommate. Zira allowed herself the smallest smile. Yes, and somehow, I think I will survive it. Ethan laughed, grabbing the cereal box off the floor. You know what? I think we make a pretty good team. For a moment, Zira said nothing, but her soft glow told him everything he needed to know. Despite the chaos, the station malfunctions, and her strict Tyrrhenian ways, they had found something unexpected: friendship. As Ethan flopped back onto his bed, he smiled to himself. Life on the Galactic Collective Station would never be normal, not with a stubborn alien roommate like Zara around. And honestly, he wouldn't have it any other way.